Good Friday evening, everybody. Hope you're enjoying yourselves, enjoying the start to the weekend. I, myself, just got off work, working 12 hours, so I thought it might be a good time for a story about my life again. And I hope you don't mind if I have a little refreshment while I do it. This is a pretty interesting story. Maybe not quite as interesting in some ways as my connection to Victor Thorne, but in other ways, maybe it's more interesting. This story starts in 2018, my involvement in it, but it dates back to 2014. And like my connection to Victor Thorne, this story developed through my writing. Somebody had read a lot of my writings in this particular magazine and friended me on Facebook. And one night I was home relaxing and pulled up Facebook, and I see this gentleman on there saying if he's convicted, he's going to do 10 years in prison. So I thought, wow, what did he do? So I decided to message the man, whose name was Edwin Turlington. And Edwin lived in Delaware County, Oklahoma, which is just a few miles away from the Missouri state line and also just a few miles away from the Arkansas state line. And back in the days before Oklahoma had obtained statehood, Delaware County, that area, was known to be a safe haven for people running from the law, or rather outlaws. And as I would soon find out, it still is, only some of the outlaws wear badges. So Edwin told me what had happened, and it began on the night of April 14th, 2014. He had bought a foreclosed property in rural Delaware County, Oklahoma, and that's where he planned to spend the rest of his days with his family. He had retired from the Army, and the property was landlocked, so his brother bought the adjoining property so he wouldn't have to get an easement. And as he was working one night to remodel the house on the property, he noticed somebody had started a fire at the end of the drive. And when he went down there to see what was going on, he discovered three men who, in his words, seemed to be making shake and bake methamphetamine. And according to Edwin Turlington, when he confronted them, told them to leave, try to place them under citizen's arrest, whatnot, one of those three picked up a bottle and charged him. And that man's name was Daryl Philpott. And Daryl Philpott had a rap sheet several pages long. And when I say several pages long, that's not an exaggeration. And his crimes dated back to the 1980s. He had active warrants in Arkansas and Missouri, yet for some reason he was allowed to operate freely in Delaware County, Oklahoma. So after he charged Edwin with a glass bottle and Edwin shot him in the leg, Edwin called 911 to report the incident, and the Delaware County Sheriff's Department later arrested Edwin for shooting the meth maker. And while Edwin was in jail, an inmate told him, "You messed up. You shot a snitch." Of course, when I began to talk to Edwin and write articles about his situation, the corruption was much deeper than one snitch. For instance, in my research, Delaware County, Oklahoma had a history of abusing inmates in their jail, especially women, and a number of these former inmates sued the county and won a 13.5, I believe, $1 million settlement. It was so high that the county had to raise taxes. And thus began my, I guess you could say, working relationship with Edwin Turlington. he begged me to get the word out for him, in which I began to get the word out for him because I thought it was a story worth telling. And after a few articles, Edwin suggested I write a book about his experiences and about Delaware County, Oklahoma. Initially, he didn't want anything from it, he said, but I said, well, if you're providing me with all this information, we'll split the profits 50-50 after expenses. I just want it to go through my publishing company. And initially, he was good with that. But things started to get a little weird with Edwin. It started off with Facebook messages, and then phone calls, and then Skype video chats. And then he would do things like say, hey, Clint, I want to send you a new laptop. You need two at all times. And I would say, no, Edwin, mine's fine. Don't worry about that. And even though he agreed to do the book through my publishing company, which it was my book anyway, but he began to rather frequently suggest he knew somebody in Delaware County, Oklahoma, that had a publishing company that could do it cheaper. And despite me telling him numerous times, no, we're using my company because that's what we agreed on, he never quite gave that up. And about a year later, he called me with the news that all the charges were dropped. Of course, there were a lot of things that led to this. For one thing, his defense attorney was a former prosecutor or district attorney, assistant district attorney, something of that nature from Delaware County, Oklahoma, who was now a lawyer and who kind of laid down on Edwin at his first court appearance after taking a significant amount of money, and then kind of suggested he was going to need a lot more money to defend him. Just when you thought this story could not get any crazier, Edwin tells me about how this guy was arrested coming back from a trip to the Caribbean by U.S. Marshals when he got off the plane. And it turns out this former assistant prosecutor, was arrested for a murder for hire plot. He had went to a prison and tried to convince an inmate to kill another inmate, a potential witness. And this story made international headlines. I know, for one, I found one United Kingdom paper that reported on it. So, eventually the charges get dropped on Edwin. But before they do, he's like, if these charges get dropped, Clint, we're not going to celebrate Christmas. We're going to celebrate Clint Lacey Day at my house. Which made me a little uncomfortable, I'd rather you celebrate Christmas, Edwin. But the charges were dropped, so I sent him the contract we'd agreed to on the book. And as I promised, it stated we would split the profits 50-50 after expenses. But I also had a clause in there that stated if he was unhappy with the book or the book sales or how I was handling any of these things, after 30 days, he could request the rights to his book back, which I thought was more than fair. That was pretty much the first publishing contract I received. So I emailed him the contract, and Edwin got really weird really quickly. And he told me he wasn't going to sign it because, quote unquote, basically all I did was cut and paste the information he gave me into a book. That's not true. He did not know about a lot of things going on in Delaware County that I found. And he said, I'll give you $250 for editing the book. And that's about as far as he was going to go. And initially I said, no, you'll give me $500 for editing this book. because I worked my ass off for this, and you're out of prison. And then I got to thinking about that, and I thought, no, that is not good enough. So I contacted a lawyer. They said, is the book copyrighted? I said, yeah, it is. He said, cut off all contact with this guy, all contact with anybody that you met through him. So I sent Edwin an email, because by this point he wasn't answering any Facebook messages, any phone calls, any texts, or any Skype requests. And I informed him the book was copyrighted. And that was my warning to him. Now, of course, this would not stop him from writing his own version of the book, which he did. And when I seen he released it, then, because I'd been sitting on this book for a while, just trying to decide what to do with it. But when I seen he released his own version, I released mine. And I have not heard from Edwin Turlington since that day. I did a quick internet search on him a while back, and apparently, from what I could tell, he's attempting to sue the individuals that tried to put him in prison, which would include his former defense lawyer. And despite how our project ended, our collaboration ended, I do hope he's successful in his lawsuit. But I guess the lesson here is, if you're going to offer to publish somebody's book, give them the contract ahead of time. That being said, it is a story worth reading. And the events that happened in this story are all true. And what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description to this video so that you can click on it and order it if you're interested in buying it. There's a paperback version and a Kindle ebook version. They're both very affordable. Yeah, not quite as intriguing as the Victor Thorne stuff, but still a very close second. Very close second. And until next time, I hope you have a great weekend. Bye.